Okay, here we go. Hello, everyone. For those of you who are in the room, I think we're waiting a few more people that are joining in here. But I will do a quick intro because we have a lot to cover here. And I am Danny. I am the Executive Vice President here at WMTEK. And I'm excited to just cover some principles, foundational principles that we have discovered over the past 10 years of working on ministry websites. And I specifically clarify ministry websites because there's a difference between a normal website and a ministry website. And many of you probably are aware of that. And we've spent the past 10 years trying to figure out how to articulate that difference and achieve success with a ministry website, not just a normal website. And so before we get started, I just want to quickly announce we're going to have a raffle at the end of this session, and we'll be giving out free coffee. These are bags that we roast here on site at our one of the coffee shops that we actually run, and that's here in Fort Pierce, Florida. And we'll be delivering that to whoever wins, along with a coffee mug to drink it, so you don't have to lap it up with your hands or something. I'm assuming you have a mug, but just in case, you're going to get a free WMTech mug for the person who wins the raffle, which will be at the end of this webinar. Okay, with that in mind, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, what we're going to be covering today is ministry websites. What's the future of ministry websites, and how do we participate in that future? So I'm going to share my screen here, and you would be able to see my presentation. Okay, so what I want to do today, firstly, is start by setting the context and some of the background to how we got here today. So, in order to look forward, we really have to kind of look backwards. And that starts with this "How did we get here" section. So, what we're looking at today is how did we get to the way that websites are built now, what websites are today, and what led to this. And we're going to look at that, and all these things are going to start to make sense, and then it's going to start to reveal what we should do about it. And so, firstly, I want to take a quick look at a timeline. I love timelines. I love being able to see again how everything came to be. It all starts to make sense when you look back. I'm a big history guy, and I think if you're not looking back, then you're gonna repeat the same mistakes you made before. So firstly, 1991, that was the first website that was built. It was built in 1991. So before then, I know it's hard to imagine there was a time where websites didn't exist. That time was real, and it ended in 1991 when the first website came. And of course, everything started to escalate very quickly from there. In 1996 was the first Flash website. Flash being, I mean, it's a little dated now, but Flash allowed you to put animations and sounds into the websites and made it more of a multimedia experience, which was pretty cool. And I know if we looked back at those websites now, it'd be kind of look a little goofy. In fact, SiteStacker's first website actually had a lightsaber sound effect when you loaded the page, which I think was pretty awesome. That utilized Flash. So then in 1998, things really took a turn. That's when Google launched. And we all know Google, they're the big elephant in the room that controls everything, it seems. But Google specifically was started by launching a search results environment where you could actually find websites without having to type in the direct URL. And of course, that changed everything. That changed the way we looked up websites. That changed the way we discover websites. But it also changed the way we build websites. And we'll dive into that. But that really changed just about everything, because if you can control the way people get to a website, then you can control the way websites are built in order to boost up their results. And we'll take a look at that. And then in 2000 was the first CMS tool, content management system. And that's when we started to go from having to code it all from scratch to actually being able to have a foundational tool that we use to build these websites that, again, made it a little more accessible for more and more organizations and people and ministries to build this thing called a website. And it's pretty wild that it was just 2000 when that came out. What's even more wild is that was 23 years ago. So that's just mind-blowing. 2007, another big evolution for websites was the iPhone was released. So this was the beginning of actually having to pay attention to how a website performed on a mobile phone, because before it was just a little flip phone or something like that. No one really cared how it looked. But now you have a significant percentage of users that are going to be using a phone when they digest the website. And this changed everything. It means we have to make sure we're aware of how that website looks on mobile. And at first, everyone was thinking, let's make an app. But then as time went on, we realized it's more effective and efficient to just make a website that responds on the phone the same way it responds on the desktop. That way, this experience is not segmented. It's the same on the desktop and on the phone. And that's what has been discovered. And of course, that changed websites forever. Moving on, we have 2013. That's when web page builders started to come into play. This is your Wixes. This is your Squarespace. This is the tool where you just sign up and you can instantly build a website by dragging and dropping. And of course, that changed the game. And I think now the average local business that has a nice looking website has increased significantly due to this increase in web page builders, which just allows you to be able to easily build a website. And that's really good when it comes to actually just presenting yourself. If you didn't have a website before and now you need a website, well, now it's easier than ever. The ease of access restricts the barriers to entry, or actually reduces, I should say, the barriers to entry. And that's what the web page builders really did. And so in the midst of all this, things are changing fast. And of course, there's been more changes since 2013. Now you have AI. Now you have all kinds of other things that are going to definitely change the landscape. And so because these things happen so fast, the ministry question, circling back to ministries, becomes how do we stay relevant in the midst of all this change? Things are always changing. We are focused on doing the mission God has called us to. So how do we not fall behind when things are changing so rapidly? And that's always been the question, is how do we stay relevant, at least in my experience in working with ministries? And three things that I want to cover as far as the answers to that. SEO chickens, CMS shackles, and software safari hunt. And I know that seems pretty vague, and it seems like there's some sort of animal theme going on. I guess animals are just good illustrations. But we're going to start with SEO chickens. And this is going to really help, hopefully, you understand where we got, how we got where we got in the world of ministry websites. So let's start with SEO chickens. And if you know this GIF, this is actually a Vine that came out like 10 years ago now, where this little girl sees this herd of ducks or group of ducks, and she goes, "Look at all these chickens." I just think it's hilarious. So continuing, SEO chickens. What do I mean by that? Well, that will start to make sense. But first, we need to look at what I call the algorithm. Sounds very intimidating, and I think it's supposed to be that way, so you don't take a closer look. But we're going to take a closer look. In 2003, as I mentioned before, 1998 was when Google was founded, and that's when SEO was really introduced. But really, it was 2003 when Google began filtering out sites, and that changed the game, because in 1998 to 2003, it was the Wild West. It was, as soon as you typed in something into the search, any site could make it to the top. There was no criteria, there was no filtering out. And so because of that, there was a lot of scams. There's a lot of just Wild West stuff going on inside of the Google results. And so Google introduced this criteria, or quote unquote algorithm, that would filter out sites in order to protect the results. And that was probably a good move. But what it led to was 7 years later in 2010, Google added some more criteria to that algorithm. So now, instead of just filtering out sites that seemed like they were fake, we were adding another layer to the algorithm. And that layer was to prioritize newer content. And what that means is Google is now going to prioritize websites that have newer content, which means that the content's being updated, which in Google's mind means that the site is valid, is accurate, is not a scam site, because there's actual content being pushed. And really, what this prioritizes news sites. If you were a site that prioritized pushing articles or updates or stories, then you're going to be boosted up the results. And that really changed the game. If you're a ministry and you were involved with your ministry or in any capacity a ministry website at the time, you'll know that for the next pretty much 10 years, the priority of most ministry websites became pushing out stories of impact. And that's not an accident. There is a side of that where we want to share the testimony of what God is doing, but there's a side of that where we were influenced by, whether it was SEO consultant companies or just industry standard, what I'll call it, to put a bunch of newer content on our ministry website so that we could boost up the Google results. And that was because of the change in 2010. And then in 2013, Google prioritized natural language so that we couldn't just write a bunch of scripts that bots would write that was a fake language. And because there was a lot of scam sites that were actually just putting a bunch of content out that was fake. So Google started to prioritize natural language. Hence, the even further push for stories that are written by missionaries on the ground or by your marketing team that actually was natural language. And then in 2017, Google prioritized content quality. So it wasn't just about quantity anymore, but it was about quality. And that was a big change because now it's not only about the amount of articles that are on your website, but it's that those articles are quality, that they're generating engagement at a high rate instead of just bloating the web. And that's kind of the history of the algorithm. There hasn't been a significant update since then. But as you can see, this obviously influenced the culture of ministry websites that came from it. And a lot of ministries, the conclusion was our website needs to focus on constantly adding new articles with high quality content in order to appease Google and grow. And I would say that that's the wrong conclusion for a number of reasons that hopefully will be evident by the end of this webinar. But if your goal is to just grow your SEO results by putting a bunch of content on your website, you're going to see failure. You're going to see a lack of impact from those efforts. And that's really not great because you're putting an investment into growing your audience, but the investment will not have the return you're looking for. And I'll show you why. Because after all that effort, your site will become a news site without an audience instead of a functional ministry site. And so when I load on the page, I'm just seeing a bunch of stories, but I don't know who you are, what you do, what your calling is, or even how I can involve myself in that calling. That's really what I want to know when I get to your site. Your site will be lower in search results than the highest paying customer. Google will change the algorithm and will continue to incorporate bias into its prioritization, which is documented. There's evidence that Google controls an algorithm. So therefore, if they don't like you, they can demote you. And you're going to put all that effort into your site's core experience to appease them just for them to say, I don't really like you. And as ministries, we should be very aware of the fact that that's going to increase over time, not decrease. And then, of course, these changes will destroy your site's giving and recruiting conversion because there's not an organic experience taking place. Let me illustrate all this because I called it SEO chickens, and I want to make sure I show you what the chickens is all about. So let's talk about chickens as an example, as an illustration. Chickens back in the day were a lot smaller, as you can see in this illustration here, this picture. In the 1930s, they were 2 to 3 pounds, and the time to feed them and then get them to market was about 14 plus weeks. And so now, today, we have this behemoth hulking chickens that look completely unnatural. They look kind of good, but the truth is they don't taste as good. And that's evidenced by every grandma you've ever talked to who says that their mom's chicken was the best. If their chicken pot pie was way better than any chicken pot pie today. Well, there's a little bit of nostalgia to that, but more importantly, there's actually truth to that because what happened is about 1950, the chicken market changed completely because it used to be that these farmers would just grow chickens and then they would get them to market in the natural way. And so the chickens would grow and take time to grow, and they'd have all the natural juices and flavor that come the way God intended. And then this outside association, this third party entity, this big organization like America's Farming Association, started to grade farms based on the chickens they produced. And guess what? The outside organization gets to determine the criteria. And so that outside organization determined that how big and good your chicken looks will determine how your farm gets graded. So it started to prioritize bigger, bulkier looking chickens that got to market in less time over smaller chickens that got to market in longer time. And due to that, we started to selectively breed chickens out and also change the entire process to expedite it. And our chickens start to taste pretty bad. They taste bland versus tasting delicious. And that's because it's a mass consumerist employ to get chickens out there versus an organic growth strategy that makes delicious tasting chicken. And it's very similar in a website. And in fact, New York Times article, just to prove what I'm saying isn't false. This is New York Times. Not that I'm a big fan of them, but they did say, why are most chickens essentially flavorless? The speed with which they are raised leaves them little opportunity to develop any flavor. The process simply takes time. It takes time to grow your audience. It takes time to build organic conversion. You can't just skip your way to the top like Google wants to convince us we can. And if we take the time to do it organically, the results will be startling, and I'll show you that. And that's kind of the illustration of the chickens there. Hopefully that makes sense. And so my advocations, I think we should all have organic free range websites. I'm just kidding, obviously, but there is a little bit of truth to that. And so what I want to tell you is there's a better way. There's a better way than appeasing Google, than boosting your SEO results, than building a website only for building an audience. There's a way to build a website that generates organic conversion and will grow your audience over time, but it will grow a committed and dedicated audience. And that better way is to focus on organic conversion. So instead of building your website to appease ever-changing guidelines from some giant company, build your website in a way that tells your story authentically and drives your organic conversion. And so how do we do that? Well, we'll talk about that. That's towards the end of this webinar, we'll talk about that. But that's kind of the first little section of what we did to stay relevant, right? Stay up to date with these SEO results. And this is why I think that's not a good solution. But then there's the next thing, right? If we're staying up to date with SEO results and we got to build a website that we can produce content on quickly, then that leads us to what I would call the CMS shackles. And the CMS is content management system. You remember in 2000, the first content management system came out. And when we're looking to boost our SEO results and draw more of an audience, then we obviously have to find the right tool to do that. And I call it the CMS shackles because I think that a lot of the tools out there create chains that don't need to exist, especially for a ministry website. So the industry standard, you can spin the wheel and you can land on a WordPress, a Wix, a Drupal, a Squarespace. Great. This is really easy. I can drag and drop. Anyone can learn how to use Squarespace. There's one problem, though. These platforms are built to focus on SEO and ease of use. And those are good things. But while those platforms are great tools for their industry, they clearly were not made for nonprofit, let alone ministry websites. And I can establish why, because the primary goal should not be for a ministry website SEO, but instead it should be conversion. And so if these platforms are built for SEO and ease of use, then we're missing the most important part of the pie. And then the question becomes, okay, Danny, you're telling me that they're not good at conversion, but I just have your word for it. Well, let me show you why they're not good for conversion. Because we have to ask the question, how do they handle conversion? And the answer would be, there's the big limitations, okay? Giving. For instance, WordPress, all of those CMSs that I just showed you, WordPress, Squarespace, Drupal, all these CMSs really, they don't have integrated giving. That's a huge piece of the puzzle. The giving is not integrated into the platform. So you have to find some third-party platform and either link away to the checkout or embed the checkout through an iframe. And both of those things create really big limitations that are going to minimize your ability to convert giving. And that really makes no sense, because if the whole point of your website in the first place is to generate organic conversion, and one of those organic conversion steps is giving, then why choose a CMS that's separating the giving experience from the website experience? The website serves a purpose of generating giving, so there's no point in separating those. And so the problem is giving has to be done through a separate vendor, recruiting has to be done through a separate vendor, child sponsorship has to be done through a separate vendor. And the website's user experience will become segmented, which means it's going to force you down a lane. Once you're a donor, you go to the donation part of the site. Once you're a potential missionary, you go to the recruiting part of the site. But that's not true to the true experience of who your ministry is. It's not a donation ministry. It's not a recruiting ministry. It's a missions ministry, and all of those things are part of it. But in order to engage, you should have the context. Whether you're a donor or a potential missionary, I should be engaging you with all of the different things that are going on in the ministry instead of segmenting the experience. But sadly, if you're using one of those other CMSs, you're limited in your ability to do that. And that's why I called it shackles. And so then that sends you on the third section of this site, this how do we stay relevant question. which is, again, as a refresher, SEO chickens. We got to boost our SEO results, which leads us to the CMS shackles. We got to use a content management system that's easy to do and allows us to do that, which then forces us, because of the shackles, to go down the software safari hunt. I like this animal theme. This picture just seems cool. I'd love to go on a safari one day. But the software safari hunt is not one I would want to go on. And here's why. Because you have to first look at giving systems. I have to go, where am I going to go to integrate my giving? So I have this website that I'm building on WordPress, for instance. Now I have to find a third-party software that I'm going to integrate with this WordPress site, whether it's through an iframe or a linkway. Now I got to find those giving systems. And all of your best options are going to contain these results. One, an embeddable checkout form that won't remember your gift, which means that when you go and you add a gift into the checkout and then you go to another part of the site, you've lost that gift. If you leave the checkout, you lose the gift. That's not good. That's generating abandonment. Poor handling of dynamic giving content. None of these giving systems were made for ministries, and so therefore they don't have an innate ability to present missionary giving content in a dynamic way that generates engagement, or child sponsorship in a dynamic way. And usually what you're left with is a giving checkout form that's just a drop down where I have to scroll through and find a name, click it. I'm not going to see a picture. I'm not going to see any information on that missionary. And I'm just going to have to trust that somehow this third-party giving system that you linked me to is going to connect my gift to the missionary. And usually what happens is donors don't trust it and abandonment occurs. No shopping cart. None of these giving systems, I won't say none, but most giving systems, third-party giving systems, are not going to have a shopping cart. And they're especially not going to be able to integrate a shopping cart into that CMS system that you've chosen because it's not the same software. And so because you don't have a shopping cart, you're not going to be able to support multiple designations in one checkout. And that also goes back to the fact that it won't remember your gift. It's not going to be integrated into the site's experience. And all of that leads to what I am so sad to say, and more importantly, this pug is sad to see, is an average nonprofit checkout conversion rate of 17%. So let me just make a point here. I want to define this term. This is the average checkout conversion. And let me define checkout conversion. Checkout conversion is when a donor adds a gift and is in the checkout and continues to the thank you page and completes the gift. Okay. That's what a conversion rate is. The average nonprofit conversion rate of donors who get into the checkout across all nonprofits and continue to complete their gift is 17%. That's an 83% abandonment rate is the average for the nonprofit checkout. And that's because most nonprofits have followed the industry standard where we build an SEO website on WordPress and then link to a third-party giving system, because that's just what you do. And sadly, what you do gets you just what everyone else gets, which is a 17% conversion rate. And when we found this is conducted by a third party. We're not even affiliated with the party that conducted this study for this stat. It was shocking. And I'll show you why it's shocking, because we're not used to this type of conversion rate. And I'll show you what SiteStacker is used to. So then you have to go find recruiting systems, the same thing, right? You have a giving system, you have a website system. Now you got to go find recruiting systems. And usually it's an embeddable sign-up form that sends the information somewhere else to another system where you need another login to manage all the information. There's no dynamic opportunity or event content. In rare cases on a separate site, there might be, but typically you're not going to be able to publish all the dynamic opportunities that exist for missionaries in an engaging way. And if you are ever able to do that, it's always on a separate URL, which you're already generating abandonment on. Again, none of this is integrated into the core website experience, which is baffling because the only reason the website exists is to generate engagement here. And then there's no creative publishing tools. There's no way to get creative with how you present these opportunities. And that's the industry standard. Child sponsorship system. It's usually on a separate website. It's a link away that drives abandonment. And there's limited customization options for child pages. I mean, think about it. If you're a child sponsorship organization, one of the most important, if not the most important page on your website is the child page, is the page where the child is showing their information. And you need to engage people at that point. It needs to be dynamic. It needs to be visually engaging. You need to be able to present information that contextually provides details about the child to simulate like I just met them. And sadly, most of the time, if you're using a third-party child sponsorship system, you're not going to be able to do that. It's going to be limited to whatever that system has by default. But when you can do it in a system like SiteStacker, which I'll get to, then you actually have control over the child sponsorship system in your CMS, which allows you to get creative with how you present these things. And then, of of course, poor sponsor to child relationship tools. Can you write a letter? Can you visit your child's page anytime you want? Can you send your children gifts? And can you do that all within the same website that you do your giving on and that you sign up for ministry opportunities on? That's the question. And the answer for the industry standard is no, because these tools aren't made for ministries. They're obviously not made for ministries. Okay. And then at the end of all of that work, which by the way is a lot of work, you have 4 different softwares, at least. I'm really actually simplifying here. 4 different softwares for one website. And of course, that limits your strategic options significantly. So now your strategy is shackled by all the different softwares that you use and the limitations that they introduce. And that limits your ability to strategize and do your mission justice, the mission that God has called you to. It limits your ability to promote that and to engage people with that. And that's the problem with this whole cycle of SEO chickens and then CMS shackles and then the software safari hunt, is it's limiting your strategy and it doesn't allow you to go strategy first. And so here's what I'm advocating for today, what I've seen work successfully many times in the past, and what I want to continue to see work in the future. And this is to unrestrain yourself from the shackles that limit your web strategy. Don't let limited CMS platforms and multiple different software vendors keep you from building an effective website that drives conversion, because you can do it. You can build an effective website that drives conversion, but you need to remove the shackles. You don't have to do the industry standard just because it's the way that it's done. It's obviously not performing well because it's only got a 17% average conversion rate. And so there is a better way. And so then what I want to do now is transition from here's the way that we've kind of always thought about it to here's the way we can think about it with SiteStacker. And so I don't know all who's on this call, but I know there's some people who use SiteStacker now. And you might be like, hey, I'm already on board with this. Okay. I already use SiteStacker. You don't need to convince me, but I want to show you why using SiteStacker is quite revolutionary. But then there's also those of you who might not use SiteStacker yet and trying to figure out whether it's even worth using SiteStacker for your website. And I'm going to transition to show you the contrast between industry standard, what we just looked at, and what SiteStacker can bring. But the first thing I'm going to do is flip these questions. Okay, so how do we stay relevant in the midst of all this change? That was the questions ministries were asking. And the answers were SEO chicken, CMS shackle, software safari hunt. And by the way, no one's ever said that in the history of humankind, I think. So I don't think those were literally the answers, but that's just a summary of where things landed. And I want to ask another question. Is how do we stay relevant in the midst of all this change? Well, I want to flip these. So SEO chickens should be converted to organic conversion. CMS shackles should be converted to unshackled web strategy. And the software safari hunt can change now to one unified platform. And then the question changed. It's no longer how do we stay relevant? It's going, this is how we stay ahead in the midst of all this change. We stay ahead by understanding the purpose of a website in the first place, and specifically a ministry website, and then using a tool that allows us to unshackle our web strategy and then drive organic conversion. So now we've worked our way backwards, and it's a beautiful cycle. So instead of going SEO, then we choose our platform. And because we chose a CMS that shackled us, now we'll choose one of those giving options. We actually unlock it from the beginning. We're using one unified platform, and I believe that platform is SiteStacker. I know that platform is SiteStacker. That's what it does. And then when you get to use that unified platform, you can unshackle your web strategy. Your strategic options are going to expand significantly. And our team, that's what our team does. We work with you to explore those options and develop new strategies that have never been done before, because this is something unique for ministries, and this is how we stay ahead. And then when you unshackle your web strategy, it allows you to drive organic conversion, and that organic conversion is going to be what we look at next. And that, again, that unified platform, I believe, is SiteStacker. And I've seen it time and time again, because what we've done is, instead of being a CMS platform, we are the CMS platform, an online giving platform, a recruiting platform, and a sponsorship platform all in one. And that allows us to just do things that are very unique and yield results that are almost hard to believe. And again, just to reiterate that, it's a unified platform that lets you build your ministry website by focusing on strategy first. Okay. And because of this, the average checkout conversion on SiteStacker is 82%. So remember, the average checkout conversion for nonprofits, all across every nonprofit, the average is 17%. In SiteStacker, it's 82%. That's a stark difference, and numbers don't lie. There's a reason for this difference, and that reason is what we looked at right here. It's because we've unshackled our web strategy and we've been able to drive organic conversion. So then, with all that in mind, I just want to remind you, traditional strategies don't work for innovative solutions. So if you are on SiteStacker and you are using the website tool, I just want to remind you that you may still be thinking in the industry standard way. Let's get some blogs out there. Let's get a bunch of different pages. Let's try to boost our SEO results and grow our audience. And we don't need to think like that anymore. You have SiteStacker. You are able to do things with this tool that you weren't able to do before. And so let's unshackle our web strategy so you're not just living on a unified platform, but not letting the benefits produce. And that's what I want to explore with this next half of the webinar. Is I want to explore, what does unshackled web strategy look like? I'm going to take the next 15 minutes or so to do that, and then I want to open up some Q&A because I do want to have some interaction. So with all that in mind, here's some principles that have developed based on implementing ministry websites on SiteStacker over the past few years. And first principle, this is tried and true. And by the way, this is not necessarily dependent on using SiteStacker. This is just a general principle. Define your primary outcomes. And what I mean by that, or what are the most important outcomes on your website? The entire site should serve those outcomes. And so one of the issues with website strategy that I've encountered is that we haven't prioritized. And as a ministry, it can be very difficult because you have this thing called stakeholders, and stakeholders all have a stake in the departments that they're a part of. And because of that, they want to see their department represented on the website. And so because of that, we've tend to build websites that just show everything all at once because we want to credit all the parts of the ministry. And sadly, what happens is no one gets any increase because of that. So when you try to be everything, you're actually nothing. And so what we advocate is define your primary outcomes. And typically, here's what they are: giving, going, sponsoring, partnering. Those are most typically, the primary outcomes for a ministry website. But that doesn't have to be that. What's more important is that you evaluate yourself as a ministry and you define, what are the things that you want someone to do when they visit your website? What are the things you're satisfied with? If I was to go to your website, what are the things that I could do where you'd say, I'm happy with the outcome of that visit? And usually what happens is when I work with a ministry, at first there'll be things like blog, like stories. We want people to learn more about us. And I think that's great. You want people to learn more about you. But the problem is when I go to see the analytics, nobody's going to the blog page because you're a ministry and not a news site. And so a lot of people aren't going to read about you. They want to see what you're doing, but they want to see who you are. They want to see what your mission is, and they want to see how they can get involved. And so what happens is the blog page doesn't get a lot of traffic. And then also, if I ask you, are you happy if someone visits your blog page and then never comes back to the site again? And the answer is probably no. I'm not happy with where that ended. Are you happy if someone gives to you and then they never come back again? Well, we're not happy, but we're happier. Like, that's a satisfying outcome. And the truth is, when someone gives, the chance of re-engagement goes up significantly because now you can reach out to them. Now they're committed to your ministry and seeing the results. And that's what we want to generate. And so those are some of the things we ask when we define our primary outcomes. And I want to give you an example of what defining primary outcomes may look like. So this is Wycliffe, and this was, we just launched a new site with them. Really excited about that. And what I'm showing you is not the new site, but I'm showing you the old site. And you'll see an arrow there that points to when I first loaded the Wycliffe site, what I saw. And what you'll notice is there's a lot of options there. There's get involved, blog, about, resources, missionaries, donate, and then log in or create an account. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different options immediately when I get to the site. And it's hard to know what the priorities are. Am I supposed to read about you? Am I supposed to get involved right off the bat? What does get involved mean? And usually what happens is if you hit get involved, there's like 9 more different options and a bunch of different options under each of these. So I don't say this to down this site because it actually did perform well, but it was missing on the potential. And what the potential was to simplify those primary outcomes so that when I'm a user, I know exactly where to go. And what this does is it usually causes what I call the Netflix effect. And the Netflix effect is when you are going to turn on Netflix and you want to watch a movie, and instead of clicking a movie and actually watching it, you go through all of the different options because of the plethora of options that's presented to you right in the beginning, and you spend all your time just trying to decide what movie to go watch, and by the time you click and watch a movie, you fall asleep. Therefore, you don't actually engage with the movie. That's what happens on a website when you present all of your options right at the top because you haven't prioritized to your primary outcomes. And so with that in mind, I want to show you what it looks like today. Instantly, you see the change. And when you load this top page, there are not a bunch of options that you have to figure out what's prioritized. There's three things. It's pretty easy to understand what the priorities are. Missionaries, serve, give now. I can give, I can view the missionaries, engage with them, or I can serve as a missionary. That's pretty simple. And what that allows you to do is then you can build a homepage that as you're scrolling down and reading the story of who the ministry is, at every stage, you know how to engage with them. It's not, you don't have to figure it out. And then when you're ready to engage because the story's captivated you, it's right there to do. It's simple to find, and you know exactly where to go. We've simplified the past for you. And what we need to understand as ministries is people want us to tell them how to be involved. That's just, if I'm coming to a site, I want to be told, how do you want me to be involved? What are the ways that I can get involved? I don't want to have to figure it out. And these are the things that make a big difference. But that's just the beginning. So once you define the primary outcomes, then you have I would call it the privilege of being able to simplify your sitemap. Obviously, if you've not prioritized, then you can't simplify. But once you've prioritized, you can minimize. And a minimal sitemap does wonders. I'm telling you right now, it does wonders. When you only have a few pages versus a couple hundred, it changes the experience as a user. It makes it simple for me to focus on what you want me to focus on. But when you're introducing a lot of different distractions and a bunch of different pages and site maps that end up going far away from the primary outcomes, then you're going to have an issue. And in terms of simplifying the sitemap, I actually have a quick example. So right here, you can see on this page, you're going to see go, missionaries, give. And if I click here, there's the expanded sitemap. So we were able to simplify the sitemap, but we also don't need to just have 3 pages. And a little trick that we've used for that is that little flyout menu right there. So when I click a flyout menu, I'm able to see a lot more granular detail on what's available to me. But that's not going to be bombarded in front of everyone's face. That's going to be hidden in the back end. So that if I really want to know the about us and the history of the organization, I'll just click that flyout icon and find it. But most people don't really need to see that, and that's what the analytics bear. And so with that in mind, the second principle, simplify your sitemap. Couple points on that, a couple advisements. Take the time, anytime you're doing a website project, whether it's with us or wherever you're doing it, take the time to think through all the different pages you have on your website currently, look at them, and really be realistic. Do I need that page or not? And if you don't, get rid of it. Don't worry about it. No one's going to miss it. If you don't think you need the page and it doesn't have analytic traffic, you don't need it. And that's going to bear results in your conversion because you're going to have a simpler sitemap. All right, next up. 3, the first load should captivate and articulate. This is hyper important, and this is part of changing our perspective. Okay, because before we were pushing news articles to the top of the homepage all the time because of the SEO. We wanted people to think we were active as well. So when people visited our site, we wanted to show them things are happening in this ministry by just pushing more news articles, as many as possible. And sadly, it had a conflicting effect than what we wanted it to have. The effect was people would load the homepage and they wouldn't know who you are, because who you are is whatever the news story of the day happens to be. But what we need to understand is that your homepage and the first thing that loads when someone loads your homepage is just as much a part of your brand as your logo or your mission statement is. In fact, you could even argue that it's more a part of your brand than whatever your mission or vision statement is, because it's what everyone's going to see when they load your website. And so with that in mind, there should be a lot of work going into what shows up when I first load the page. And what I've kind of written here is to captivate and to articulate. In the captivate side, okay, you can see this Ethnos 360 homepage. When we worked on our project with them, we spent hours, not minutes, not even tens of hours. We probably spent 30 to 40. Well, I guess that's tens. We probably spent like 30 to 40 hours just figuring out what image to use for the homepage on the initial load. And also, we did a lot of Photoshop work to make sure that image was captivating. But why did we do so much work on that image? Because one, we wanted it to be a really high quality, high resolution image. But two, we wanted it to be an image that visually did storytelling. We wanted it to visually tell the story of who the organization is, because that makes me have to do less work as a user. And so that's the image we found. And this image now is instantly resonated with Ethnos. Any of you who've ever been to Ethnos site, you're going to know this image. And so you're going to resonate, you're going to connect Ethnos 360 with this image on their homepage. And here's the key. They never changed it. They kept that the same. They didn't feel the need to, oh, we need a new image because our audience is getting bored with it. Because at the end of the day, your audience isn't going to get bored with the thing that captivated them. And also, new people are going to be able to be captivated by that same thing. It's a part of your brand. And then articulate, the second word here is you have this space to make a statement on who you are, on why you exist. And this is really hard work because you don't have a lot of space. You can't put a paragraph or two paragraphs right on the top of the homepage. But what you can do is condense it into a few words or a sentence. And in fact, Ethnos did that right here, a thriving church for every people. And in one of our sessions we did at our last conference, we asked the audience, what do you think Ethnos does based on just this picture? And most of the people said tribal church planning, which is exactly what they do. And that's because we worked hard at articulating that without having to give you a bunch of words that explain the background of the mission and why it's important. We just want you to know what it is and the distinction of who we are right off the bat. And what I'm going to do is show you a couple examples just to kind of nail in that point. Transworld Radio, right here. We have an image that obviously highlights a radio. It's youthful. There's some radio beams or airwaves going on back here. And then there's a statement that just instantly does the work for us. 3 billion people listen to the radio every week. 2 billion have never heard the gospel. Just like that, I have an understanding that this is a radio ministry that's dedicated to reaching the unreached. Boom. In one load. Now I can make my commitment as to whether I'm going to keep scrolling and dive deeper because I have a contextual awareness of who this ministry is. If that's just a random blog of the day that has a pixelated image or a story that doesn't captivate me, you're risking on losing the conversion of the person who visited your website that day. And so that's another big point. And if you combine that, you can see Ethnos simplified sitemap, primary outcomes, and a first load that captivates and articulates. That's 3 things that can make a big difference. And then 4, understanding that your homepage is your primary funnel. So if you're simplifying your sitemap, you really want your homepage to almost be your grand central station. This needs to be how I get to all destinations on a website. And whether it's giving opportunities, sponsorship opportunities, missions opportunities, all of these should be available and accessible from the very beginning of the website experience. As often as possible, offer the opportunity to convert in one click. You should always be able to convert in one click, almost no matter where you are on the website, but specifically starting on the homepage. And this is effective. I want to show you one more thing. Not one more thing. There's a few more things, but this is Mission to Hope's website. And you can see that right from the beginning, there's donate today, give now, find a trip. All of the primary calls to actions are right here. And it's a very simple homepage. It tells the story of who they are, and then it allows you to give right from the homepage. Okay, so if I click give now, I'm going to trigger this pop-up, and just like that, I'm in the checkout in one click. And that is because all of this, the giving system and the content management, is all managed in SiteStacker, which allows us to not have a segmented experience. And then when I go back to the homepage, up here on the cart, look, that gift is there. And what we've seen is because Mission to Hope provided a giving opportunity right on the homepage, instead of making you click give and go to another page to see all the giving opportunities, you can check out right from the homepage. The homepage was the #1 entry to their checkout 1 year after launch. #1. So the majority of the donors who got to their checkout were getting there from the homepage because we pushed that to the top. And this is where SiteStacker begins to provide distinction. And if you're using it and you aren't presenting all of these opportunities for engagement right at the homepage, then you're missing an opportunity to take advantage of some of SiteStacker's benefits. One of the other examples that I want to show you, it's on the screenshot there. WGM, I went to them earlier. I want to go to them again because one of the things they do is they actually provide ministry opportunities using our map module here. And this is for potential missionary recruits. So right on the homepage, I don't need to go anywhere else. I don't even need to load one more page to see every opportunity that's available for service for me as a potential missionary. Not only can I see it, I can filter it down. So I can go here and I can see an adult and family, or maybe the ministry type I'm interested is business. I click that on the left side here. And instantly everything narrows down to just the business opportunities. And I see it's only in Asia. Okay, I'm still interested. I click on Asia. All right, I'm interested in this one. I click on this one. And right on the homepage, if I scroll back up, I'm still on the homepage. I'm loading all the details of that specific opportunity to serve, and I can click let's talk to get the conversation started. This is conversion from the homepage, even for missional opportunities. And it's that type of thinking. Like, this tool didn't exist until 3 years ago, when, because of all this website strategy and unshackling it using SiteStacker, we realized we could build a map module like this because we have all of the tools right inside of the same platform. And that's the kind of stuff you can take advantage of on SiteStacker that's going to allow conversion to happen earlier and allow people to have a better experience on your website. And then another principle, and by the way, there's probably more principles, but for sake of time, I only wrote 6. So this is the 5th principle, and then we'll wrap up with the last one. No dead ends. So you've simplified your sitemaps to prioritize your primary outcomes. Your website exists to service these primary outcomes, and there's only a certain amount of pages you have. And then you're presenting all this dynamic content right on the homepage to captivate people early on. And then the key is that when I'm engaging with stuff, there's no dead ends. What does that mean? It means there should be no siloed pages on your website. No matter where a user lands, there should always be an opportunity presented that encourages them to deepen their engagement. And think of the YouTube recommendations or the infamous TikTok algorithm, but not like that, because we're not invasive like TikTok or YouTube. But think about how the principle works is I came to watch this video, and then because you're recommending all these videos, I'm now on the website for a longer period of time. And on SiteStacker, the average session rate goes up by at least a minute typically. And that's because we are committed to this principle of no dead ends. And we've in fact built our tool to support that. So another example, I'm going to go back to TWR here. If I go to give, and then I go to, for instance, a missionary. Let's find a missionary here. David and Renee. So I go to David and Renee's profile. I'm now on their profile, which, by the way, this is part of what SiteStacker does so well as well, is it provides missionary content just like marketing content, but the difference is I can give to it. This is not a bland checkout form. This is a dynamic, engaging missionary page that I can give to. Many of you are reaping the benefits of that, and that's really, really important when it comes to conversion and building an effective website. But what's also important is when I go down to the end of this missionary page, I don't just get to this footer here where my experience ends, but I get to this end where it actually suggests related staff, related projects, and related opportunities. This is key. So think about what we talked about earlier with the CMS shackles, where I have to go to a separate recruiting platform and a separate giving platform, and here's my content management system in the middle. And then when I go to the recruiting platform, I'm not going to be able to engage with giving content or vice versa. Well, here's an interesting stat that should really inform your perspective. We find that a good portion of missionary recruits usually ends up going to the missionaries page before they sign up for an opportunity. And that's because they're trying to see the missionaries on the field. If I'm interested in serving in Asia, then I'm going to search all the missionaries in Asia and see which ones are out there, maybe explore their profile, and just kind of get a feel for what it's like to be a missionary. And then if I'm doing that, if I get to the end and it's a dead end, I might forget to go back. I have to go back to the serve page and see the opportunities. So instead of doing that, what if opportunities that were related, all the Asia opportunities, were right here on this missionaries page, and that deepens my engagement and it doesn't create a silo. And that allows me to actually convert from a missionary page a potential new missionary. That's the type of things that SiteStacker can do, and that's because it's built to create a ministry website, not just an industry standard SEO website. And so that's just an example. Another example, last example here for the no dead ends. Think about with these principles, how it might inform the way you think about normal things. For instance, this is Childcare Worldwide site, and I love something that we did with them and their team, which is as you're scrolling down on every single page, this is a child sponsorship site. Their focus is sponsoring children and sharing Jesus with them. And as I scroll down on the page, I'm going to get to the typical end of the page, which is usually the same for most organizations, and it ends in a newsletter sign up. And then typically it ends in like, here's every other page on our site that you can explore, and then here's our privacy policy. And is that going to be the same here? No, because we were thinking of unshackling our web strategy, and because we were thinking of the principle of no dead ends, instead of using that space to show all the different pages you can go to, we're presenting a child. And this child is randomized based on the user session. So each user that shows up on your website is going to have a different child presented to them. And that allows me to see one last call to action, one last potential call for me to sponsor this child. And we haven't been live long enough to study the results of this, but it's the principle that works. And the principle is no dead ends. And no matter what page you are on this website, if I go to the give page and I scroll to the bottom, there's the child. And every page is going to end with a child that's saying, hey, you can sponsor this child and bring them to Jesus. That's the principle of no dead ends, and it bears really good fruit. Okay, so with that in mind, the last principle, and again, there's more. There's a lot. If you want to talk more, we can schedule a 2-hour call or strategy session, whatever you want. I love doing strategy with organizations in this, and I'd love to figure this out with you and how it could apply to your website. But the key to all of this is once you've made these decisions, hold the line. I got Leonidas there holding his shield up, 300 Spartans versus a bunch of Persians, and they held the line. That's what you have to do for these decisions, because at the end of the day, none of these decisions are industry standard. So there's not a lot of outside entities that are going to understand the decisions you make, but the numbers will bear fruit. So give it time for the numbers to come in, because what we see is we see significant increases. 400% increase in missionary giving is something we saw in 1 year. We've seen hundreds of percentages of increases in online giving in 1 year. We've seen tons of different stats. The increased conversion rate to 82% from what is usually 15 to 18%. All of these stats just end up having a tremendous impact on the entire organization, not just the website. We even see average one-time gift size go up significantly many times. And so what you have to do is be committed to holding the line on these principles that we're discussing here. And if you can be committed to holding that line, the analytics will prove you right. And I promise this. And this is what we saw. I showed them here. Transworld Radio. We did a 1-year review with them. That team, I know them. And again, because we're partners with the people we work with, I really appreciate their team that we worked with. And they held the line. I know that because they've told me. There's many requests that have come in since we launched that site to add this page and add this page and change this. And they held the line because the principles which we built the website on are strong. And they use those principles and the projected numbers that we gave them when we worked with them of what the results will be in a year to hold the line. And then a year later, we came back and we saw all of the results come in, and they were mind-blowing. We saw such significant increase. Some of them were hard to believe, but they were accurate. And that's because they chose to hold the line. If they hadn't held the line, I'm not so sure what the results would have been. So shout out to Transworld Radio, but also I want to shout out all of the different organizations who are holding the line on these principles. It's going to bear fruit. And so that's the last principle, is hold the line on these decisions you make, be confident in them. And again, just to wrap this up, SiteStacker is not just a website platform. It's a ministry software ecosystem, right? So we have a ministry CRM with donor management, online giving, a CMS, a child sponsorship tool, and workflow automation, which you can automate entire mobilization processes. Those of you who don't know that, now you know. Those of you who do know it, let's work on taking advantage of that, because there's so much you can do with this platform, as hopefully has been illustrated today just in the context of website. And those things have tremendous impact. And we'll have more webinars to study other areas where we can see that impact. But specifically on website, we see results that are pretty startling, and they can kickstart a lot of your growth programs. And so with that in mind, that's the end of my session. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here, because we got 5 minutes left. So I thought I'd get it in 15, but it took 25. So I see a question here. Can this presentation be available later so we can have our ministry partners watch it? Yes, there will be a recording of this entire presentation that will be available on our website, and you'll be able to share it with all of your stakeholders. And we encourage you to do so because I truly believe in these principles, and hopefully sharing these have been helpful. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and then I'll wrap up with the raffle as we wrap up. But please type your questions in the question box. If you don't have any, then I'll go ahead and wrap up. Oh, it looks like we got one. Okay. How can we find out our own checkout conversion rate as a SiteStacker user? Would it be accurate to look in Google Analytics for users landing on checkout for those versus those who get to checkout? Thank you. Or is there a better way? Great question, Aaron, I believe from childcare. So yeah, the way we track conversion now is through Google Analytics. Google Analytics 4 has been a little bit of a nightmare for almost everyone because they just made it so complicated. It used to be really easy. You would go to the checkout page and track the amount of users, the percentage that continued into thank you. One of the things that we did in Google Analytics 4 is we created a funnel, and there's a way to do that in Google Analytics 4 where you track the funnel. You start with the page selected as the checkout page, and then you track all of the indirect continuations to the thank you page. And that's one of the ways to do that. So I know that's complicated. Google Analytics probably has some resources, but what you're trying to do from a SiteStacker perspective is track all of the people who've entered your checkout and the percentage of those people who made their way to the thank you page. So that's how you do that, and we can talk more about that as well in the future. Awesome. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, you can use Google Analytics to track website traffic. We have a Google Analytics module that allows you to be able to paste the snippet code from Google Analytics into your SiteStacker site. And when you do that, it's going to inform the Google Analytics website with all of your traffic data. There is steps to do that. And on our training site, SiteStacker training, you'll be able to find a resource for Google Analytics. And if you ask our support team, they can provide that to you, which will show you how to set all of that up and how to track it. Thanks for asking. Any other questions? Does WMTEK offer any in-house SEO consulting? So no, we don't. Obviously, that would be. I'm not the biggest SEO guru. Really, with SEO, what we can do is we can help consult you on how your site is set up. There are certain things that SiteStacker offers in Site Planner that allow you to just take advantage of making sure that your site is SEO optimized, which is like entering the metadata and making sure all of the images have descriptions, things like that we can definitely schedule some time to just go through your site and do an assessment, like a health check. In terms of SEO consultation, that's something that we can do. It's not necessarily a growth track, and SEO, again, just as a reiteration, we found it's not the biggest priority. It is a priority. It's important that your site performs on SEO, but organic traffic, converting that organic traffic, and then raising awareness through peer-to-peer, which is another part of our tool that we didn't get to cover today, advocacy and allowing people to spread awareness of your website and your giving opportunities. That's one of the best ways to grow, and it will boost your SEO results. In fact, if you look up missionary website right now, I think, or missionary sending agency, I think we have 2 SiteStacker websites that are in the top 5 there. So it is absolutely possible to get up on the results there. I think it comes with time, just like those organic chickens. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think we are good then. So thank you so much, guys. Again, if you ever have any questions regarding website strategy, you can reach out to our support team, and we'd be more than willing to schedule a call to just talk through this, to give you a health check on your website and how it's set up, to just kind of evaluate and help you think through these questions. This is what we do and we love to do it, and this is really our calling. And so we would love to assist you in that. And if we do that, we I think we'll see some really good results. So here's what I want to do. I want to do the raffle. And so I'm going to share my screen because I want to make sure you guys, one of you lucky people, gets a coffee. So here's the raffle, and you should be able to see that here. And this is the moment of truth. Spinning, spinning. And the winner is Taylor Evergreen at Lifeline. So Taylor, I don't know if you're in here, but congratulations, you have won the raffle. So you will be receiving a bag of coffee, cowboy coffee, and a mug, and we look forward to sending that to you. So again, all the recording of all our webinars, but also this webinar, will be on our website at the webinars page, and you'll be able to send this to different stakeholders. Thank you, everybody, so much. Hope you have a great day. We hope to see you soon.